Oh,
And now, Turnbuckles, Trunks, and Titles presents to you Nicholas London and Q-Ball Carmichael.
ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Triple T Radio presents Turnbuckles, Trunks, and Titles with the man of the hour, the man who carries more power than any man I know. His name is Q-Ball Carmichael. Q, welcome to the show, buddy. How are you? Yeah, I don't see a lot of people. I don't see a lot of people, you know? The weeks fly. The weeks fly by. Boy, you ain't kidding. We have a lot of stuff to cover tonight. We're talking the greatest superstars that never held that world championship, and that right there alone is about 6 shows worth. But you and I are going to try to cover it in 60 or do what we can for here on with the fans on YouTube, no less, in HD, top quality, only the way Q Ball does it. Well, the thing is there is a whole list of people that should have been world champion. I mean, that list is it only grows more and more every year. Let's be honest. So I can see where somebody else would be thinking that, what about this guy and what about that guy? And I'm sure you and I could sit here and have a friendly debate over guys that maybe you think should have been, but I don't think they should. The biggest thing is that world championship, you're the guy putting the most food on the table. You hear the old dudes back in the day talk about, if you were at the top of that line, you were the champion, you were making the most money. Now, maybe today that's a lot different, but we know back in the 70s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the early part of the 90s, that was a big deal if you got to hold that world champion.
which actually did exist at that time. The champions were making the most money. I had said before that I was lucky enough to meet Nick Bonkwinkel's in-laws in Hawaii, and they were telling me there was times where he made 17 and 18, 19, $20,000 a night as champion. I mean, that's a lot of money. It really is. And as we said before, there was a year, I think it was 83, maybe 84, where Ric Flair made more money that year than any baseball player, basketball player, hockey player, or NFL player. So, I mean, there was a lot of money in wrestling. There still is. It's not as spread out as it was. But, let's get right down to our first person who continually popped up on a lot of people's list. And I'd like to go with that one first, and that's Tully Blanchard. Why do you think Tully Blanchard never got a heavyweight championship title?
Honestly, I think it was wrong place, wrong time. When he came into when he was in the NWA, and I'm trying to stick with the major promotions here. So when he was in the NWA,
Yeah.
you've got Ric Flair, okay? And you've got guys like Harley Race that are coming off of and your Dory Funks and your Terry Funks, Ricky Steamboats. You're coming
Ricky
off
Steamboat.
in a
Yeah.
really bad spot there. I mean, then you move on down, you create the Four Horsemen. Then you and Aaron leave and you go to the WWFE, and you're a tag team specialist. And who's there? Hulk Hogan, Macho Man, Ultimate Warrior, all those names. So it just seemed like every territory he went to, he was coming in at the wrong time, and that they were not in need of anyone to carry that ball at that time. Let's say you.
Well, I've often said the same thing with Tully is I think the fact that although a great technical wrestler, pretty good on the mic, he was coming up at a time where the heavyweight championship was passed off to Ric Flair, the man with the ultimate charisma at the time. You had Dusty Rhodes too, who just had charisma like crazy.
Yeah.
But I think Tully is exactly what happened. What you said is he came up at the wrong time. There were a lot of guys around, but you think about when he went to the WWE as the Brainbusters. There was the Rockers. There was Legion of Doom came in. There was the Bushwhackers, who were more of a comedy team at the time, although they had been the most violent tag team in history as the Sheepherders. The tag teams out there were just stacked. I mean, the tag team title was equally as important and put over as well as the heavyweight championship at the time in the WWF/WWE. So I think he got his just dues, but I think back then when you became a tag team and you had success, you were labeled as a tag team specialist, like you said. And really all the work you were going to get was as a tag team. So I think, coming up when Ric Flair clearly was the guy to carry the torch in the NWA, WCW, you had Sting, who had so much charisma it was off the charts. You had Junkyard Dog there. I mean, there was a lot of guys with a lot of charisma, a lot of tough shoes to fill. I think if Tully had been born 10 years sooner, he probably in the 70s or 80s would have been the heavyweight champion as far as the NWA goes. I really do. I think he's just one of those guys that came around at the wrong time when they were passing the torch. He was involved in a lot of major angles as a horseman, which was great for him. If you think about it, all the horsemen were never going to be a contender to Ric Flair as long as he had the title. It just wasn't going to happen.
No.
You know what I mean? So I think that's sort of a tough spot.
I think it's a tough spot, and I think you kind of hit it right on the ball with the Four Horsemen comment because, number one, I want to apologize for not using Dusty Rhodes' name in my list of guys. I should have. That was on me, though. But the Four Horsemen were so red hot. It didn't even, in my eyes, Ric Flair wasn't the only world's champion in that group. They were all in a league of their own. You look at guys like Arn Anderson, who Arn is the most critical of himself that I've ever seen. In my eyes, he could have been a world's champion, but that's no here or there. If we get to that and that's in our list, we'll talk. But right now, totally, I think, in my eyes, I think you're right. 10 years prior, you could have been seeing Tully on the other side of the fence battling Ric Flair with somebody else in that position with Arn and the Four Horsemen. That's what I believe, and I think you hit it right on the head.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment 100%. And that's not to take anything away from Tully as a wrestler and as a person. I had the pleasure in the mid 90s to work a lot of shows down south with him on them. And Tully's a gentleman. He's a class act. You can have a conversation with him. He's a good guy. And I think that, I think the thing that most people wanted to be in that era of Ric Flair being champion, they wanted to be in that clique. That was the first big clique.
Yeah.
Was the Four Horsemen.
I would agree.
And I think I agree with what you said. Number one, they're making the most money of anybody, Flair and the whole group. So you put yourself in that position, and then you make a decision with Arn to go to get a huge payday in the WWF in the 80s. I don't think people understand how much money was being thrown around in the 80s at wrestlers in the WWF. It wasn't even comparison to the Crockett promotions. I mean, guys went up there and quadrupled what they were making by going up there with Vince. So it's almost a no-brainer to do it. And when you're up there, you're a tag team specialist at that point. Your career's winding down a little bit. It is what it is. Great guy, made a lot of money, smart guy with his money. But, it's time to move on to another one. And another one that I got a lot of comments on was Roddy Piper.
Oh, baby.
Roddy Piper, he could go in an Olympic swimming pool and get so much heat yelling at the people outside of it, the pool would dry up. I mean, that's how good he was. But I also think that Roddy Piper didn't need a heavyweight championship. I don't think he needed one. Plus, he was, for a long time, he was a floater. I mean, he was in the NWA. He was in the territories. He was in the AWA. He was popping up all over the place. So for a guy like him, every time he went to another territory, he got that huge payday again. It wasn't about the money for him being a champion. And I don't think he wanted to stay put long enough to be a champion. And it's no secret that Roddy did like his time off. I mean, he loved to be with his family. So I think he didn't need it, number one. And number two, when you got to look at the era in which he went up to Vince. I mean, it was the land of the monsters. You look at the size of some of those guys up there. I mean, Hogan was the champion. I think if Piper had gotten up there sooner, maybe when Bob Backlund was champion or when Bruno was champion, he might have been the guy, the heel, that got the title dropped to him. I think, again, he was up there a little too late on the tail end of it, got massive heat, not a guy who needed a title to get over, came off as a complete lunatic which is great. That was his gimmick. Totally different guy when you talk to him. Everybody says you got to be yourself dialed up to a 10. He was dialed up to a 20. I mean, it was unbelievable as far as I'm concerned. And then he got into movies. He did They Live, and he did a big segment of movies. And I think that pull from Hollywood back then was different. I think the promoters looked at doing a movie as a distraction from pro wrestling, not an addition to pro wrestling. So I think that might have been part of it too, because They Live as a cult flick. I mean, I can still watch that movie today and enjoy it. I thought it was just a great storyline. They did a great job, and it was the launching of the black guy that played in it, Keith David. It was the launching of his career, and he played in everything from Pitch Black to Psych. I mean, he just had a great career acting. So, that movie propelled him and launched him. But I think, Hot Rod came across almost a little too crazy to be heavyweight champion, and he didn't need the title. He liked to move around from territory to territory. So I think him arriving on the scene at WWE was when he went there pretty much permanently. I think that was an era where the belt was already designed to be in one guy, and the guy had a ton of charisma, was huge, and I think everybody else was additional. There's two things people like to see. They like to see a babyface champion getting chased by a guy and going into a pay-per-view match with that guy. And they also like to see a heel get his butt beat. And I think Roddy represented the opposite of the heavyweight champion, although not a contender, because he was so successful as Hot Rod that if you imagine that if he went into a culmination of matches and lost a bunch of championship matches to Hogan and pinned in the middle, it could have possibly ruined his momentum. The hardest thing in wrestling is to get traction and momentum. When you have it, you don't want to mess with it. It's the whole story of, in ECW, Tommy Dreamer was asked for 3 years to be champion. He refused Paul. He said, I don't want to do it. I got enough momentum. I'm better as an underdog. And finally, when Raven left, they put the belt on him. But it was against Tommy fought and argued endlessly to not get the championship. And some people actually ask the promoter or tell the promoter, in some cases, please don't put the title on me because it could ruin me, And I think that as much as Hogan was a babyface up there, Piper was the exact opposite as a heel. But the WWF, as you look at their criteria going back years, typically they had a heavyweight champion that was a babyface and a transition heel to be a title. Whether that transition heel was Ivan, or whether that the great Ivan Koloff, or whether that transition heel was Stan Stasiak. They always had a heel to transition the belt to another babyface. The Iron Sheik to Hogan. Iron Sheik beats Backlund, and Hogan beats the Iron Sheik. And the Iron Sheik, I think, was, that crazy heel guy that people were shocked when he won the title. But I don't think it was good business to keep the title on him too long, and they didn't. They transitioned it off to Hulk Hogan.
Right, I agree. Here's my take on Roddy. Number one, Roddy's my favorite heel of all time. People ask me all the time, Nick, who's your favorite wrestler? I always say the same thing. I won't answer it. I refuse to answer it. Because I have a favorite from every generation. I mean, I don't just pick one guy and say he's my favorite. It's not that I don't want to narrow it down, or maybe I do, but I just think that everyone has something different that they offered the business. Roddy Piper offered the business the greatest gift that the business could have ever had, and his work in the ring was flawless. He was not the best worker to ever lace up a pair of boots, but he didn't have to be, because he had the gift of gab.
Nope.
And he had the gift of a jab. And the guy could make you hate him. He could make you love them. He could make you cry, and he could make you smile. I always go back to Hulk Hogan. Hogan always said, Piper, if you just would have done the job, we could have switched the belt back and forth. Even though I don't think Vince would have, job or no job, because Hogan was Hogan, and at the time, the Rock and wrestling and everything else going on, why would you risk a payday just to switch the belt? But Roddy Piper, to me, will always be the guy that got away. If the championship if there was any other names we're going to say tonight, and I'll go on record of saying it right now, if there was any guy in this list who really should have had that one run, it was Roddy. Because he was so special.
Right.
He was amazing. He was beyond him.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a true story, but I also think that you have to look at, again, at that period of time, a heel was only a transition champion. You know, where did the Iron Sheik go after he lost to Hulk Hogan?
Literally, he went nowhere. He was done.
Right. His run was done. And I think that if they'd have put that title on Roddy, there could have been a possibility that they were afraid that same thing would happen with him, and they didn't want to lose him.
No.
Because he had the innate ability to get under people's skin. He could stir that emotional kettle, whether he wanted to hate you or whether he wanted to love you. It was that easy for him to put people on that roller coaster. So, you know, there's a fear, I think, from the promoter's standpoint. Do I want to take this guy that if I don't have Hogan defend his title, can I still fill building? Well, with Roddy in the main event, you could fill the building still.
You're damn
So
good.
why at that point do you want to? Yes, and why would you want to, as a promoter, take the chance of throwing a belt on him just to be a transition champion? Let's say they transition from Hogan to Piper to the Warrior instead of from Hogan to the Warrior. What would have happened at that point? It could have totally shut him down. He could have been gone, and Vince would have lost the guy that had the ability himself to sell out a building.
Yeah.
So I think from a business decision standpoint, and people seem to forget, people are very passionate about pro wrestling. They're so passionate about it that sometimes they throw the business sense out of it. But you have to look at it, being a businessman my whole life along with wrestling, I have to look at it like a business decision. Would it have been a good business decision for Vince to transition that title to Roddy just to put it on Warrior and have Roddy just disappear? Just people be so disappointed that he lost to the guy that he may have just vanished like the Iron Sheik did for a while. So I think it was a smart business move to not put a belt on Roddy Piper for those reasons. But I agree with you. He's in my top 3 of all-time favorite wrestlers. He really is. For a guy with average size and average height and average looks, his skill set was enormous, And he did it the old school way. It wasn't about a hip toss or taking a hip toss or taking an arm drag. It was about using your mouth as much or more than you used your body. Also leads to a longer career when you can do that too. So very important there. So we've got Roddy Piper. I think it might have hurt him more than it helped him to have that title because it would have been a transition because Vince is keeping the belt on a babyface no matter what. So I think that's a big one. A lot of people put down Curt Hennig, but I think what they don't realize is in the late 80s, when the AWA was still selling out buildings in the Midwest and out in Portland and all over that area, they had their own territory, but they sold out buildings. And Hennig was their world champion, and he held the title for 373 days. So he got a good payday. Do I think at some point that he should have had a belt on him? I do, but you also have to look again from a business standpoint. He could be in the WWF tomorrow, right?
Yep.
He could be there, and the NWA could call him and offer him $1 million more a year. He was a family man. Where do you think he's going to go? Is he going to stay for $1 million less or leave for $1 million more? And this was the era when Ted Turner had his fingers in the pie, and there was unlimited funds and unlimited money. Yep.
I'm writing checks.
I know,
OATM
exactly.
Eric.
Right, that's why I thought writing checks, cashing checks and snapping necks, right?
Yep, that's right.
So at that point, you have to be very, very cautious who you put that title on. Bret Hart's a classic example. You know, Bret didn't want to drop the strap. He especially didn't want to drop it in Canada, you know. And you got to look at the screw job. That was possible at any given time to pull that off.
Sure it was.
You know, and I was up there during that time. People say that it's a work. They don't understand. It was not a work, not at all. So I think that, you know, and he was leaving for greener pastures because Vince at the time made a contract with him that he couldn't pay. So he basically let him go, but he screwed him on the way out the door, which is unfortunate. So I think with Henning, it really just comes down to it was for sale the highest bidder at that point, and you had to be very cautious on somebody that came in because, you know, Vern Gagne swore he was going to send somebody in there to hurt Hogan. When Hogan got signed away from AWA, you know, it was common knowledge in the wrestling business that Vern was pissed, and Vern said, I'm going to send somebody in there who's going to hurt him. And so they were really cautious on people that came from the AWA too, because, you know, you got a champion, and pretty much any wrestler with the skill set of a Henning, he could go in there and tear somebody's ligaments in the knee or ankle like that, and then they're out, and then he bails for a bigger payday. So it was common knowledge that Vern wanted WWE to hurt the guys come in there to hurt somebody. So I think that was really part of the equation. Was possibly he came off a title run, he went there, he stayed for a while, but he was sort of a back and forth guy where the money was good. And I think, you know, to a certain degree, that hurts a little bit, but the Mr. Perfect gimmick was incredible, you know, and people who know him said he was that good. The only one thing I heard is the segment they did shooting baskets, it was one take. All that stuff was one take until they got to the golf game. And then that 35-foot putt was like 28 takes.
I heard the same thing.
He was that good athletically.
Yeah, he hit it. I heard he hit it over and over, and the minute the camera started rolling, he couldn't hit nothing.
Yep, exactly. So that's kind of funny, but, you know, great guy, super nice human being, super tragic way to go out. Unfortunately, I think he could have been the world champion, but I think there was some consideration that, and I think Vince understood this, that when you're a family man who's dedicated to your family, you know you have a short window of your prime in wrestling. It's a very short window. Some people it's in their 20s, some people it's in their 30s. There are days when it was in your 40s.
Yeah.
You know? So in that window of opportunity, you have to make as much money as possible. And if Vince is paying you $1 million and WCW calls and offers you 2 or 3, especially with Turner's money back then, you're going to go. I mean, because you have to worry about, ultimately, you're not going to retire and hang out at Vince's house.
No, that's
you're
right.
You're going to retire and hang out at your house. And I think that was part of the decision not to put a belt on Henning in the WWF or in WCW.
I agree.
So we get to cross him off the list.
But now,
go ahead.
We gotta take a quick second, Q. We got a couple things we need to quickly talk about. You know, I know we're the worst for this, you and me both. But we gotta quickly we gotta go in. I want to talk a little bit about Brainstorm. Come on, you should know that. Brainstorm is Cue Ball's way of shopping. And, well, you guys are hearing him right now on the show. He is a testimony. I mean, With this stuff, Q sounds like he went to Harvard for 20 years. Q, tell the fine folks just how good Brainstorm is.
It was only 6 years at Harvard, but let me tell you something about Brainstorm. Here's the thing, and I make no bones about it. I wanted to develop a formula that would help me. Oh, because I knew there were a lot of people in my shoes. What I mean by that is, as we get older, you've had 5 or 6, 7 concussions. Your short-term memory's not as good as it was. You forget where you put things. You run into somebody, and 10 minutes after you see them, you remember their name. You go through that thing where, oh, that word's right on the tip of my tongue, and you can't spit it out. So what I did with Vox Nutrition in Utah is, with their scientific staff and a physician, my buddy Dr. James Hubbs in Woodstown, New Jersey, who okayed the final formula. We developed something using all natural herbs and vitamins to improve a person's memory. What I mean by that is things like Bacopa montanari. We use Bacopa extract because it's stronger. Bacopa's been used for depression and anxiety for years. We've also added in GABA. GABA is naturally produced in the brain, and it's produced by choline. Choline is in it. So the choline and the GABA together, what those two things do, and the N-acetyl L-tyrosine, is those three ingredients actually cause your neurons to fire faster and harder like they did when you were younger. But sometimes the neuron hasn't fired to the length of the nerve in so long that it can't get there. So what these do is actually recreate a new nerve ending that goes to the same spot. So those things are crucially important. Things like GABA, choline, N-acetyl L-tyrosine. We also have phosphatidylestern in there. That is an ingredient that is crucial in quick functioning process. In other words, your brain functions faster on that. DMAE and DHA are two other key studied nutrients that in clinical studies at the University of Michigan have proved to, in a double-blind placebo study, to improve people's memory and focus, reduce depression and anxiety. So all this stuff has been tested by universities. Every ingredient, there's 41 ingredients. It also has 100% of your daily vitamin C, B3, B4, B5. It has a lot of B vitamins in there. One of the great things for older people, if you're starting to have memory issues, it's not just older people, young people have it too. But what it doesn't have any vitamin K in there. People on blood thinner regimes, like I was on for a few years, and I got them off now, but you can't have any vitamins with vitamin K in there because vitamin K is a blood thinner. You're already on a blood thinner. If you get a wound or a gash, it continues to bleed at a very rapid rate. Your clotting mechanism is not working in your body. It also keeps you from getting blood clots going from the heart to the brain through the carotid artery so that you don't get a stroke. But it's safe for people on blood thinners. The ingredients in there are designed in what's called a proprietary blend. Simply means we own the rights to that blend. There's a patent on that blend. Nobody can copy the exact amount of ingredients in that blend. So it's all natural, and it's working really good for a lot of people. If you go on Amazon and you read the reviews, I mean, you'll hear people bragging about how much quicker their memory was, how much faster their thought process is, that they're suffering from less depression than they did. So it's a great product. And the great thing about it is because I had such a big batch made, which financially is tough, but I was able to do it. So we're able to offer this on Amazon. Retails for $23.99. We're able to offer it at $23 with a 25% off coupon. So immediately you're going to save nearly $6. So you're looking at a month's supply of this product for about $16 and change to give it a chance to try to help with your memory, your focus, less anxiety, less depression. The key is you do have to take it every single day because it builds up in your system.
Okay, guys, listen. If you are interested in this product, they can go to TripleTRadio.com, our official website. the official website, TripleTRadio.com, has the little logo. It has the bottle right on the site, guys. You can click it. You go. It's great. It's TripleTRadio.com. It's Amazon shopping Q's way. Q, we're back here on the show, man. Listen, you have got to be one of the smartest men I know when it comes to this business. And I admire the way you are able to sit and come up with these great ideas. And I'm not going to get too into them, but the brainstorm I think is great. And I think that everybody should consider trying it because I can guarantee you they will not be disappointed. Now, this show, guys, we're going to tell you guys right now, we're going to be upfront with you guys. There's going to be a few little issues here and there, little glitches, if you will. The reason why is Q and I have decided to bring you guys a different format. Q and I like doing the radio stuff, but we think we're able to develop a better relationship with you guys if you can see us and know that the emotion that we have is real and how much we love this business. So if the show is not available on iTunes like it used to be every show, that's not to say we're not going to do the odd show and upload maybe a bonus. But we just want you guys to know that, we love you guys and we think so highly of you. And Cue Ball, your corner pocket has been, lack of better term, extraordinary for this show in particular right now. Let's talk about your next picks on who you think could have and should have been a world's champion.
Well, I'm going to go with the list supplied to us by the listeners and followers of our show and members of Q Ball's Corner Pocket. And so I'm going to go through their list first. And the next one on the list is Arn Anderson. And I feel the same way about Arn that I do about Tully. I think the Horsemen becoming a tag team specialist, perhaps being there at the wrong time, and no secret that later on in his career, Arn had some back issues and had to retire a little bit earlier than he really did. And he's been with the WWE for years in many different capacities. I think that Arn was one of the most skilled technicians in the ring that I'd ever seen. Now, what I mean by that is whatever he did, no matter how little or how much it was precise, accurate, and at the perfect time. His psychology was incredible. But I think Arn going into the Four Horsemen was a perfect fit. We know he had the television title. We know he had some other titles. But I think it was a perfect fit for Arn to go in the Horsemen, which immediately takes him out of contention for the World Championship down there. He goes with Tully to the WWF. He's now known as a tag team specialist. And that kind of follows him the rest of his career. And I think, that is almost talking like about Tully is talking like about Arn. I think they both fell victim to the same thing. I really do.
I totally agree. I said it earlier. Arn Anderson, to me, is another guy, and he was in the right place, maybe the wrong timing. We got to see him and Flair mix a couple times in WCW in the later years, but in his prime, when Arn was fired up, I really think Arn could have held that World's Championship without question.
Yeah, I think he had every bit of ability to have that title. But again, I think due to his affiliation with the Horsemen and, him and Flair were best buddies. So I think that at that point, he wasn't going to, and of course, when him and Tully left, they became tag team specialists because that was when the real world of professional wrestling actually had tag teams that had names. It wasn't two guys stuck together. You had the Brainbusters, you had the Rockers, you had the Legion of Doom, you had the Bushwhackers. Everybody had a demolition. You all had a tag team name plus an individual name.
Yeah.
So I think that at that point, it kind of labeled you a tag team specialist for the rest of your career. Not wrong with that. The Brainbusters made a lot of money when they
You're
went
right,
to
they did.
WWF. It was a smart, again, it was a smart business move for them to go, and it was a smart business move for them to stay as long as they did.
Yeah, hard to disagree with that. I love Arn Anderson, and I love some of his matches, some of the stuff they did with the Rockers. I would credit them for maturing Sean and Marty in the ring in their tag team matches.
Oh yeah.
Then telling the story.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Because they listen.
Yeah, they had great matches with the and great matches.
Yes, Sean and
So
Marty.
let's move on because I know
Yep.
time. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. What's next?
Here's a name that my friend Andy Mankiewicz threw out there. She spent years with Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazine. She was a photographer and a writer. Worked under Bill Apter for many years, along with Tim Walker, who was the main photographer. But Brandy took some pictures. She wrote a lot of articles. Very smart girl, knowledgeable in pro wrestling. And she threw out a name there that not a lot of people are going to be familiar with, and it's Gino Hernandez. And I believe, unfortunately, he died at, I think, 25. Unfortunately, for passing away so soon, I think that he had enough natural charisma, skill and ability in the ring that he would have went one of two ways. He would have been a Ric Flair or a Ricky Steamboat, depending on which way he decided to go. But he would have fit with either one of those guys, had tremendous matches. He could have been a world champion if he had lived. But unfortunately, at the pinnacle of his very young career, he passes away due to one of the demons of the business. So I just want to address that with Brandy so she knows that I listened to her and I agree with her as far as that goes. Here's a name. I'm saved really the best arguments for last. So let's throw this out there. Rick Rude.
Boy, that is a no-brainer, isn't it?
Yeah. You?
That is a no-brainer. I know.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think Rick Rude obviously held titles with Mandy Fernandez. They were a great tag team together. And then Rick went off on his own. But who cannot forget the Rick Rude Jake the Snake Roberts feud? I mean, over Jake's wife. I mean, it was incredibly interesting. It was another. Huh?
It was stellar. It was amazing.
It was great. It was great, and whoever airbrushed those tights at Rick Rude's was a genius.
Agreed.
It was an airbrush.
Agreed.
Because he came out with stuff. I remember when he came out with Jay Snake's wife airbrushed on the crotch of his pants, and I was like, "Whoa, that's heat!"
Yeah.
And it truly looked like those guys wanted to kill each other. Both big guys, about 6'4", 6'5", big guys. Rick Rude, could he have ever been in any better shape? Probably not. Jake didn't need the physique. Jake had all the other skills, master psychologist. But I'm telling you, Rick Rude, I think after leaving the tag team scene and being a singles wrestler in the WWF at the time, I think he labeled himself as a guy who was willing to push the sexual envelope. And I think at the time that was a danger for sponsors. Again, coming from a business standpoint, do you want a guy as your heavyweight champion who's got, who knows, airbrushed on his pants, doing the hip thrust with the hands behind the neck type move? He was Val Venus before Val Venus was ever Val Venus. So
But you have to. One thing I'm gonna
and
say,
some early about this.
number one, you're right. Though he was Val Venus before Val Venus was Val Venus. But the one thing I will say is that's probably the only time that character could have really been a world champion, because in all seriousness, it doesn't age well. I mean, can you imagine in 2020 him bringing a woman into the ring and kissing her and laying her on the mat? I mean, that does not age
Now
well at all. But
it doesn't age well at all. No, it's hot for a while,
yeah,
then it
yeah.
burns out. Shooting star.
The first harass,
And I think
the first sexual harassment that goes into Vince's office is when it dies down and the guy's gone to a new territory. I love me some Rick Rude, brother. I love me some Rick.
Exactly. So I think that can speak for itself. And you, of course, he was a great guy.
I'm losing you, Q. Come back to me. Come back to me.
You were frozen. I was texting you. You were frozen.
Oh,
You didn't move for like a minute.
perfect.
So
I got it.
if I go to my phone, rest assured, if I go to my phone, it's going to you. So, but yeah, I think that's the problem. That if so, maybe not want to point that out anymore. I think the problem with Rick Rude was clearly apparent when he made his run. There was just no G-rated content in that run
there was
at
none.
all. There wasn't
None.
even PG. It was mostly R. Yeah.
Zero.
So we'll talk about Rick, and let's go right to Jake the Snake.
Man, there you
Let's go right to Jake the Snake. Who could ever forget his famous promo with Mean Gene Okerlund about the greed and people had. I was fortunate enough to be watching that when it happened, and I'm like, whoa, this guy just went and turned a biblical quote into a professional wrestling promo. What a genius. Greatest psychological promo guy of all time. The greatest. I mean, psychologically speaking, there was no one better in the head than Jake the Snake Roberts. Why am I seeing you in the picture instead of me? I'm no longer seeing me in the right-hand corner. I'm seeing you in both pictures.
You know, the way that Jake would talk so slow, and I'm gonna get you, and I'm gonna put you DDT, and then I'm gonna go outside and I'm gonna get Damien. The way he would talk, the way that he would slow down, and every word Jake said meant something. It was huge. It meant everything. You know, that's
Well,
so
this
methodical. He,
no, and it's the thing that Demolition Axe used to talk about. Billy Eady, he would say, when everybody's yelling, you talk. When everybody's talking, you yell.
yeah.
And everybody was screaming promos. And Hogan, say your prayers, brother. No, all those guys. Doing that, and what happens comes Jake. It was almost creepy. So Jake, although one of the things that was known for a very long time is Jake had a lot of demons. I mean, he's conquered him now. But the people probably never thought about. I don't understand. And I mean no disrespect to pro wrestling or anybody that loves it or is in it, but a heavyweight championship is a prop. It's a prop to prop the guy up higher. Jake had a prop. What was Jake's prop?
It was a 300
Damien.
pound snake sitting on his back. You're
Yes,
damn right.
that's better than any world championship title could get over with people in the world.
Yeah,
And when you put
absolutely.
that
Absolutely.
slimy serpent on people after he DDT'd them, it was like, oh my gosh. It was just like, wow. That was his prop. He didn't need a title. They looked at him from a business sense and said the same thing about him that they said about Roddy Piper, or this guy can fill a building, because back in the day, and I don't think people understand this, there would be a house show in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and another house show going on in Boston, Massachusetts the same day, the same
Sure.
Saturday night. There would be two house shows. So they
Absolutely.
had to have a draw on each one of those, and not always was Hogan available to defend the title. So who are you going to get for draws? Well, if I've got a guy of Jake's quality and I've got a guy of Roddy Piper's quality, I know that I could put each one of those guys in a separate building or together, and again, I can fill the building on non-televised event or televised event, either way. Either one of those guys were capable of selling out an entire arena based on their name. So again, Jake had Damien. He had a 300-pound prop, and fans couldn't wait. First off, he brings the snake in. It's in the bag. It's squirming around. It's trying to get out. It's thrashing. People who love snakes are going cool. People like me that hate snakes are going, oh, gross. Ugh, look at that thing move. I mean, half the crowd was watching the snake. The other half was watching Jake wrestle. Then the other half switched. So, but when he beat the guy with the DDT, everybody knew what was coming. It was like Hogan's finish for years, right?
Yep.
Everybody knew the big leg drop was coming, right? And everybody knew that when he beat the guy, that wasn't really the victory. It was pulling the snake out of the bag and putting it on the face. So people who loved him and loved snakes went yes, and people who hated snakes but loved him still went yes. So, snake lovers and snake haters united in that moment when that heel got that snake put on him. So that was so powerful that if you think about that, that was equivalent to any World's Heavyweight Championship, maybe better, because I've never seen anybody freak out because somebody laid a title on them once they were passed out.
No, you're right.
So I think that was Jake's deal. His snake during his heyday was his prop, man. It was what got him over. Unfortunately, it injured his neck severely too. But he carries 300 pounds something around your neck. It's gonna hurt.
No, but you're right,
after
though.
a while.
You're right about that because.
So we've got.
No, go ahead.
No, that's it. That's all I had to say about Jake. Greatly talented guy. I've had the fortunate pleasure of working on shows with him before, and talking to him, and I was booked against him one night, and he went to the promoter and said, I was Diesel at the top of the time. He said, Q's a big guy. Nobody's going to buy me short arm clothesline him in the corner and giving him a DDT, short arm clothesline corner, and give him a DDT. They're not going to buy into it. He's too big. And at the time, I was probably 260 and maybe 10%. I was jacked. So he said, look, It's okay with you, Q. I'm going to put me with one other guys that's a little smaller or maybe a young guy, and I can teach him something. I said, no, bro. He had Jake the Snake Roberts on that show, and he had a guy who became a really good friend of mine. He had George the Animal Steel on that show, who I later got to wrestle too. So that's there you go. Now you're moving. As soon as I text you, you're frozen. You start moving. I'm not going to do it anymore.
Well,
Who knows?
I love
maybe
George Steele. I had the
maybe you're like a pit member. You don't.
I love George Steele. I've had the pleasure of talking with him numerous times before he passed, and you couldn't ask for a nicer guy, a sweetheart, and somebody who took so much pride in coming on the show, and he was so excited, and so no, I loved Jim very much so.
Yeah, great guy, and I'll tell you a funny story. You know, there's a match of me wrestling him for IPW. He wasn't feeling good that night, but afterwards we go out to this local bar, pretty big place, with tables and stuff. And before we go in, he goes, "Hey kid," I'm like, probably like 40 at the time. He's like, "Hey kid, you know we can't set together, right?" I said, "No, we wrestled each other. We can't break kayfabe. This is a local bar." I said, "No problem." So he goes and sits down with the promoter and with all the baby faces, and he attracted girls like Beverly Hills Boulevard or Rodeo Drive. I mean, it was crazy. Girls knew who he was. He always did the Clorox gun, so he had a green tongue. So people, let me see your tongue, let me see your tongue. So he's over there at this table with these baby faces, and they're all having a good time. And none of the drizzling shit heels went out with me. So I'm over here by myself at this table. I'm alone, right? There's George Steele, Doug Flex, the promoter. There's, I think Lou Marconi was there. I mean, the list of guys and the baby faces at the time, Tom Brandy, all those guys were over there. And I'm sitting there, by myself going, this sucks. But he was a cool man. You could be the same bar on the other side, but you could not sit near him, man. He was not into that.
I like that.
So it was great. But yeah, he is a great guy, man.
I love old school. I love old.
Yeah. Oh yeah, old school is the best. Scott Hall.
Whew! If there was ever a man that could have been the world's champion, it's Scott Hall. Hands down.
Yeah. And you know, at that time, he was living a pretty straightforward life. He had something unfortunate before he got into wrestling that actually showed on it. I think it showed when they looked. People were able to find it out. It was public record. And I think that may have hurt him early in his career. But I think when he was up there as Razor Ramon, I think that he had the ability, the skill, the body, and the talent to be a world's heavyweight champion. I honestly do.
Yeah.
Why he didn't get the title up there, this is a guy I can't explain away due to the business. I can't explain away due to the fact it was him and Diesel or, you know, the clique they had up there. I can't explain away why Scott Hall did not, in his prime, get a heavyweight championship. I can't explain it.
Man, Scott.
I don't know. I'm pretty smart to the insides of the business.
Yeah.
No reason that I know of.
He was
wrong time.
He was so good, and he was on the ball. You know, I think of all his Intercontinental Championship runs, and I've heard people say, "Oh, if he wouldn't have left. Oh, if he would have stayed, he'd have gotten there. Maybe he would have." But as history has shown us, a lot of guys that we think, wow, what an Intercontinental Champion, don't necessarily get to the big spot. And I can sit here with you and we can say guys like Dolph Ziggler, yeah, he got there, but did he really? He held that belt for what, a couple weeks? Guys like Edge who almost didn't get there. He barely got there, and then when he got there, he was good. Look at Jeff Hardy. Yeah, he held it for a minute, but he never had no long run. Let's look at somebody like let's go back to his era, okay, to Scott Hall's era of guys. Diesel, yes, he got one. He did. Marty Jannetty didn't get one. We can sit here and we can go through these names because people always say, well, maybe. There was no maybe. If he was going to get that title shot, he'd have gotten it. Vince would have got him to stay, whether it was the money. He says he left because of the money. Well, if Vince was planning some big title, some big run, Vince would have kept him there. He wouldn't have let him leave. Vince knew he had nothing for him.
Story, and I think that may be part of the issue of why he was more motivated to leave too, because he knew there were no plans in the work for him to be a heavyweight champion.
Right.
And I think that truly, out of everybody we discussed, the business sense wise, Piper, the business sense wise, other guys didn't get it. I don't see any way as a promoter that I could not have taken a Scott Hall and built him up to be one of those guys that could be my world champion. I mean, I just don't see how you could drop that ball. No, I really don't. And do you remember when when Vince brought back the fake Diesel and the fake Razor Ramon?
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that?
Worst moment.
Boy, there was a lot of pissed off fans. There was a lot of angry people.
Oof, I guess there was.
Yeah.
And that was my fandom. People. I was one of those guys that was furious.
I think everybody was. I thought that maybe he had actually brought him back, but I knew from being inside of the business that they were locked down under contract. And WCW had some really good contracts with people. I mean, you really weren't going to go anywhere. They weren't written by, what's the name of it? Because they sued me before. The WWE lawyer out in Pittsburgh who once sent me a cease and desist order on one of my shows. I'll go into that in another day.
Talking about McDivitt?
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe that's it.
Gary McDivitt.
Yeah, in Pittsburgh. Yeah,
he's in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, so anyway, it was kind of, Scott Hall is one of those guys where I look at Vince and say, you didn't get it. You missed the boat. He was over. His Razor Ramon gimmick was great. I mean, he only had to say a few words with a Hispanic accent, the least amount of content of any promo anywhere. Hey, Chico.
Yep.
I mean, that was it.
And he had them.
Easy peasy. Yeah. So, usually I've got a business explanation why somebody doesn't get a title. I've got a wrong place at wrong time.
Yeah.
They just missed the boat on him, in my thinking, So we've got Scott Hall as our original guy who wasn't there at the wrong time, was there at the right time, obviously wasn't used correctly, and Vince would have had enough money to lock him down. So let's go on to a couple other ones.
Okay.
I got interesting one from one of my buddies in wrestling. We talked about him before I went on the show. He's very famous. At one time in the 80s and 90s, he was everywhere. And he came up with Manny Fernandez. And, I'm not going to go too much into that because Manny had a tag title. Manny was very successful. Manny's Manny. And knowing Manny, he was not going to put up with any BS from any promoter. If Vince would have wanted him to wear bullhead into the ring, a bull's head, and be the raging bull, and have steam come out of it, and he would have said, "There's the door, and I'm leaving." You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yep.
So he wasn't going to go up there. In the '80s, everybody was a cartoon character in the WWE for the most part.
No, you're
Most of those
right.
guys were cartoon characters.
You're right.
You know, I mean, it looked like a circus because everybody was giving. Now, I'm not saying anything disparaging about it
No,
because
no.
it was a period of time where guys first made a lot of money wrestling, a lot of money. You know, I knew Bam Bam Bigelow personally. When he told me what he got to get pinned by Lawrence Taylor, that I would have done it for 1/5 of that money. so, but he came up with another interesting one besides Manning, and that was Austin Idol, who was a territorial Southern giant back in the day, and he's big and in shape and blonde and had Ric Flair type charisma, Buddy Landel type charisma. But he never got a shot on the big stage. And I would need one of our people to leave a comment, go to the website, leave a comment, or call in sometime to the show and explain to me if they knew him, why he never got the big push. I think, he never got the big push in the NWA. He was a regular guy in the Mid-Atlantic, for years. Great physique, great look. I don't know, even though his entire career, I don't know enough about Austin Idol, the person, or the places he was when there was an opportunity for him. I don't know. So I can't, unfortunately, Rick, I can't comment any more on that because I don't know him well enough to say, well, maybe he had a bad attitude, or maybe he didn't want to travel, or maybe he didn't want to be a clown, or maybe this, I don't know. But my buddy Rick Link gave that out there. And I always thought a lot of Austin Idol. I thought he was great in the ring. He was muscular. He was talented. He looked to me a lot like if you took superstar Billy Graham and you made him muscular but not a bodybuilder, that would be Austin Idol.
Well,
you know what I mean? He had that kind of physique, great.
Well, no, one of the things I recently heard Hulk Hogan say was Hulkamania. He actually heard Idol use it way back, and he called it Idolmania. And he said, well, he's only using it down there, so I'm going to use it up here on a much bigger scale. But again, it just shows you that Austin Idol obviously had his mind on the game, and as we all know how big the name Hulkamania is, what if Austin Idol would have been in that predicament and that was his line? Just saying.
WrestleMania. Yeah, no, he was definitely had the skill and the talent and the ability, definitely at the time, to be a contender, and he could be a heel or a babyface equally as well in my mind. He probably should have been a contender during the time that Ric Flair was in his mid to late '80s run. Austin Idol would have been a perfect person to put in there, and I know he has had a lot of great matches with a lot of big name people. I know he's had some title matches, but what I'm saying is, in Memphis he was big, down in the South he was big, and promotions put titles on him and things. But we're talking about the big companies. How does a guy like that get overlooked by a major company? I can look at him from 25, 30 years ago, 35 years ago, and I can look at him and say, why? Because I don't know. He was at least worthy of national championship TV title, at least that, if not world title. So that was a great question by Rick Link with Austin Idol in there. And I don't think Manny would have put up with any cartoon BS. So starting to wind down a little bit. I've got a couple good ones left. What do you think of Steven Regal?
I think he's one of the best workers in the world, hands down. I don't think there's any question. His work was impeccable. Everything he did made sense. He never did anything that didn't. So, I think that that was a boat missed by WCW when he was in his prime. He could have easily had a big run.
Sure, and he had that British "I'm better than you"
Yep.
sort of persona going on, which is great. Did I ever tell you the story about me sitting next to him one night on Monday Night Raw?
No, I don't think so.
Actually, no, it was Monday Night Raw was the night before. Cicero and I were booked, and we were supposed to go out after Tiger Ali Singh. Now, Tiger Ali Singh, nice kid, big guy. His dad, Jeet Singh, was well connected in India, and Vince was interested in doing tours of India. Tiger was raised in Ontario, that's where his dad lives. So, in order to get into these coliseums in India that seat 120,000 people, not 50 or 60, 120, some of them more. He made a deal with Tiger Ali Singh's dad to give him a job in order to get into India. And then his dad opened the door to India. But it was a Monday night. Cicero and I were supposed to go out. We were going to be the last dark match. Ali Singh was doing the dark match. And after his match, he gets on the mic, which he's not supposed to do, for 7 minutes straight.
7
rambling about, yes, 7 minutes straight, rambling about nothing. Vince at this point didn't want to send guys to kill him because he was still trying to make sure the India deal came through, right? So he tolerates it. Long comes up to us and he goes, "Sorry, players, got to scratch you." Like, Cicero and I had great chemistry. We would have put on we would have had a really nice match. And when it felt good wrestling the guy that I traveled the roads with, that I wrestled dozens of times and tag teamed with him for years, it was nice to go out in the garden and have a match with him. So the next night we're taping SmackDown, and now we're in, I'm going to say we're either in the First Union Center in Philadelphia, or, because it was the Garden Monday night, or we're out on Long Island at the Coliseum taping SmackDown, which is on Thursday nights. It was taped. Raw was live, obviously. SmackDown was taped. So I'm wrestling somebody, so I'm lacing up my boots, and I look over, and Regal's there. And I said, "Who you got tonight?" And he goes, "Tiger Ali Singh." I said, "You'll drag a good match out of him." He looks up at me and goes, "Mike, that's not the idea." I'm like, oh. So I finished getting dressed, and I tell all my boys, we got to watch the monitor during Regal's and Ali's match. I go, "Oh, why is he going to put him over?" I said, "No."
No.
Brother, he stretched him like a rubber band. I mean, people are not supposed to bend the way. It was a dark match, obviously, and I'm like, Regal in a dark match, what the hell? But the whole idea was to let him know how tough it can be, and less than 2 weeks later, he tendered his resignation.
No way.
He probably walked in and saw him up against Regal again and said, "No."
You got to
So,
you got to teach him a lesson. So
yeah, well, you know what? He paid for that 7 minutes on the mic and scratching us. So Regal, I think they knew from the get-go when they had him in the WWE that he was going to WWF. He was going to be an integral part of the behind the scenes.
yes.
I'm almost positive they knew from the get-go that he wasn't going to go anywhere. And he's not a guy that would go, "Oh, I want a title." He's a guy that'd be like, "No, let me just go out and do what you want me to do. And, if you want me to work with the boys, I'll work with the boys." So I don't see him wanting to have a title more than he wanted to have a job teaching people, because he accelerates as a teacher and instructor. That's his gift.
Yes.
As good as a wrestler as he was, his gift is really, truly passing on the knowledge and teaching a guy how to have a wrestling match that goes 8 minutes in the middle. Manny used to invite me to train guys who went to the WWE for fill-ins to get dark matches, basically get a tryout. And that's the point where they put him in a classroom with Regal for 4 or 5 hours before they put him out there.
Yeah.
So they were looking at these guys. So Manny and I would go down to South Carolina, and we'd take 3 or 4 guys, and we would work with them. Manny'd work with them. I would take notes and help where I could. Manny would work with them, so they were able to do 8 to 10 minutes right in the middle, maybe hit the ropes once, maybe hit the corner once, but actually have a compelling wrestling match in the middle of the ring that made sense from start to finish. So, and Manny's great at it, and Regal loves Manny. And, if Manny was probably more conformative, I don't want to say that in a bad way because they'll kick my ass, but he just doesn't put up. He's a low tolerance for bullshit. This is what he has. So that's why he didn't go up there. And we're gonna come down to the last guy that I got on my list. You ready?
Yep.
Iggy Slapowitz. Just kidding. No Iggy Slapowitz. There's a little humor in Triple T Radio there. There's no Iggy Slapowitz that I know of.
My.
Finley.
What is wrong with you? What is wrong with you?
Brother, you need to have a list before you even, like 2 notebooks, before you even start asking what's wrong.
Well, I'm sitting here and I'm like,
there's nothing better than looking at your face when I say Iggy Slapowitz in all seriousness and look down on my paper and look up at you and you're like,
I was like,
Iggy.
What the fuck? He won what?
And that's why.
Wasn't that?
That's why Triple T Radio is so much fun to do.
Oh my god!
You know the old popcorn Jiffy Pop is as much fun to make as it is to eat. We're as much fun to make as we are to watch. Finley, I can do a real simple equation with Finley. Tough SOB. If you put a title on him and he didn't want to lose it, you weren't going to be able to send anybody in there to take it off of him. But I think also he. He always kept a home away from home and, a home where he's from. I think that he was happy with his schedule, from what I understand. And I think by the time he got to the WWE, they were already at the point where they're looking to put a title on a 20-year-old,
Yeah.
I think it was just he was too mature. Now, you go back to the early 80s, mid-80s, when Nick Bockwinkel in his late 40s, early 50s had the heavyweight championship. You go back to the 1970s where Lou Thesz at 60 had a heavyweight championship. You put Finley in any of those categories, especially when it was about Vern Gagne's wrestling, Lou Thesz wrestling, they're champions, pair of boots, that's it. I think Finley fits perfect in that era. I think he was just born 15 or 20 years too late. Otherwise, he's a champion in my book anywhere,
Yeah, absolutely.
And that concludes my list. And just anybody in the corner pocket, if I missed one of the guys that you put on the list, I apologize. I think I covered all of them really well. A couple with no explanations for, a couple born too early, born too late. Some guys tag team specialists. Other guys like Roddy Piper and Jake the Snake didn't need a title. Jake had the belt and Roddy had the kilt.
Oh, brother.
There you go.
That's how you end a show. Jake had the snake and Piper had the kilt. And that's the way we do things on Triple T Radio.
It is. Hey, good hosting the show with you, Nick. Thanks for your hard work behind the scenes. And I hope people enjoy us and will tune into our YouTube channel.
You know what, man? Thank you. Thank you. And we will see you next week. We're going to do this whole thing all over again.
Boom. 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 Yeah.